So by this point, we've looked at lighting and the camera setup and how to render. But we haven't really talked a lot about materials yet. And this is pretty dull model at this point. We don't really have a lot of information in it about what it's made out of, about the way that it looks. So what I want to talk about really briefly is just how materials work in Maxwell. I tend to like to have my models organized by material. It makes it easier to apply materials and easier to edit, as opposed to trying to find each object and applying material to it. So it's a good idea when you get to this stage to kind of organize your model around that principle, and that's what I have here. I have glass and the ground, and this is really, I call this basic because I'm not sure what it's made out of yet. It might be stucco, it might be concrete, it might be something, you know. So I haven't really edited that yet. But if I have my layer set up like this, the way I can apply material is just to go into material swatch and just pick a box there. I check the box for assign material by plugin. Go to browse, and this actually brings up a good point. I can't pick any materials unless I've already loaded them into Rhino or into a Maxwell. So actually, before I do that, I want to go into my scene manager and go to materials, and then basically here's where I can put my different materials here. And I'm just going to actually just remove everything for now. So I can go import MXM. That's where I go to the files I gave you under Maxwell materials, and you can see I've got a lot of different options here. Got this one called Gray Diffuse, and what that is if I just double click it, it's just a basic diffuse kind of color. It doesn't have any real texture; it just has color, but it works as a Maxwell material. It works physically, and what I could do with that is I could just click on this material swatch, and I can go into assign material by plugin, say browse, and then click on that box, and then that's going to apply that material. You can see instantly it actually changes the way that the light works in the scene, because now light is bouncing off of that, as opposed to like before when it didn't have enough information. Like about the way that the material worked with light. So I would have to go in and probably adjust my exposure value a little bit to compensate for that. And that's good. That means that we're actually getting something that's physically active within the scene. And so that's pretty cool. We'll go back to the materials here. And I can go in and I can find some kind of glass material. This one that I got here, this low-grade glass. This is actually one that I just downloaded. If you go into the Maxwell webpage, just do a search for Maxwell materials. You'll find this webpage. You can find all kinds of materials. I downloaded this one called low-grade glass. It's just a clear glass. It's not really optical. It's just like a glass. But if you look for something like, say, wood, you get all different kinds of wood. You can preview this. This is just a widget that just shows you what it looks like, and then you can say download. And then if you unzip that in a directory you have access to, you can import that into Maxwell as an MXM. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. So I've got this glass. This is a procedurally generated material. It just means it's generated mathematically. It's not something that requires any textures or anything, so it doesn't really have a preview. But if I go in and I apply it to my glass layer, so you can see that really changes the building now. There's a big difference in it. And if I go to render it, you'll see that it actually has like reflection. You can see that I can see through it, but it has a little bit of tint to it. That's pretty much what glass does. That's pretty much what optical glass does. I can go in and I can, if I had a material that I wanted to make, if I wanted to make one, I could clone it, and I could just call this pink. If I go into the basic diffuse layer of this one, what I want to do is just change what this reflectance layer here is, and this should actually give me. And you have to you have to refresh it, but that should. And then if you refresh the, I haven't applied it. And it's not going to do anything if I don't apply it. If I go in and I put it on my layer here. Oof. Yikes, right? It's like the Simpsons house. Now, don't do this, but this is a good sign of also saying that things that have too much saturation are not really. They just make things a little bit too bright. Most things are kind of desaturated. That's a little bit better. It's pretty crazy. Like let's be honest. We probably wouldn't do this in a building, but and again, this might actually cause you to change your exposure values in the image. So this is just to say, like, if you just want to add a color to something like that, like that's how you just take the basic grade diffuse material, change the reflectance color. This is what if you look at it at 0 degrees, what color is it? It's really only it makes a difference, these two things, when you're looking at glass, because if you look at glass dead on, it looks like something, and if you look at it from an angle, it might look different. It might look more or less transparent. That's what this is trying to simulate. The color doesn't update unless you update the preview, and unless you update the material in Maxwell in the scene. But this is weirding me out, so I'm going to go back to my safe kind of gray material here. So go ahead. So here I've got a couple objects I made. I got a box and a simple kind of extruded plane, and we're going to talk about texture mapping. And it's the idea that if you've got a texture, it's usually a flat material. It's usually like an image, like a JPEG or something, and you're always taking it and you're basically wrapping it around an object. In this case, you've got these kind of boxes. So you can imagine we could take a picture of something and put it on each side of the box, and then we can make that box look like it's made out of concrete or made out of wood or some other kind of thing. And we need to be able to actually control that so that we can control how that texture is stretched over the object. And I'll kind of show you what that looks like here. So I'm going to go to rendered view and go into my scene manager and go to import, and I got a couple of these things that are under the Maxwell folder. These are like these arrowway textures. I'm going to give them to you in the zip file, but these came with our installation. So just take this one called boards. And you can see it looks like kind of boards that you'd find on a deck or on a wall, and you can actually just click and drag that material onto an object, and that'll do it. And if you look at it, you can see it's kind of rendered. He's got these kind of boards here, and let's go ahead and Maxwell Fire kind of going so you can take a look at what that looks like. So there you go. But you can see that there's definitely kind of these seams in the like material where the boards are. And you can see though that we've done, you look at these boards and you look at the boards on the box, you can see that these down here have been stretched, and this has really not been stretched. You can actually see that it's been taken and just put on the side. So it's like if they're made out of the same like material, these boards are smaller than these boards, and that doesn't really make any sense. So we might use texture mapping to stretch them so that they have the same material sort of like proportions. So if we go in, I'm gonna go ahead and close this actually. We go into my object. I can click on this like texture mapping blip here, and I can say apply box mapping. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn off fire for the time being. Apply box mapping. So this is basically a box. It's a stretched box, but we're going to apply that kind of mapping type. There's other kinds like a planar map, which is just a plane, or a surface, or spherical. And it depends on what kind of object you have. Most of the time, box mapping is going to work for us. We deal a lot with those kinds of objects. So you go to box mapping, and an easy thing to do is just to say bounding box, and I'm going to use the world coordinate system. And yes, it's capped. And so now I've got my map on here, and then I can go into the UVW coordinates, and I can change the tiling. UVW is the coordinate space. So if you've got X, Y, Z in physical object space, that corresponds to U, V, and W. So U is X, V is Y, W is Z. Usually don't mess with the W coordinate, with the Z coordinate. You do mess with the X and the Y, and I'll show you what that looks like. So if right now the tiling is 1. If I made that tiling 2, You can see it actually doubles, right? I can also do half, and that'll stretch it. Same thing in the Y. I can actually control what that looks like. Okay, and that will help us. Here, if I go and box map my box here, capped, yes. And I've got control over this, and I can say, well, like I want these to be similar. You can really change that a lot and kind of affect what that looks like. But their space is a bit different, because of the size of the object. But that's not too bad. Those look fairly similar. And then I'd probably want to increase the amount of tiling here. Let's go ahead and put fire back on so you can see what that looks like. And you'll have to note that when you change things in fire, and let's actually go ahead and put some sun on. That makes a huge difference. When you change the tiling, it doesn't update. So you have to actually reset fire in order to see that. Just a little thing. Okay. So if you're looking at this, though, you can see that maybe I don't like where the seams of these things are. So how do you change that? Well, what you can do is you can go into that. Actually, I'm looking at this. See this edge here? That would be where the Z comes in. So you might affect that. It's actually not doing. I don't know what to do. Let's go into the texture mapping, and we're going to show the mapping. And you can take the mapping widget, you can actually select it, like once that's turned on there, and you can manipulate it. And so you can do things like, I can say scale, and I can manipulate the widget. So I'm actually changing the scale of it. I can also move it. So I can move if I want to put the seams on the end here. Let's see what I'm doing over here. And I might like that, right? I can also, if I want to, I can rotate that texture, which is weird, but maybe you want that. So if I wanted to do it diagonally, or I want to do it vertically, I can do that. You can also control rotation here, but sometimes the widget is just kind of graphical. Let's do a one-dimensional scale. So if I don't like the end of this, like the way this is all stacked up, I could try to scale this. And see, now you can see what I've done. And then once you've done that, you can just turn on, you can say hide mapping, and that'll turn that off. The other thing you can do is, if you want to specifically do something, if you explode a surface, then you can apply a surface map to it, and then you can just control that one surface as much as you want. Okay, so if I've got something that's just a plane, I can go into planar mapping, and I would do a 3-point for this. Bounding box won't really work too well because you're actually looking at things that are flat in one plane, so box doesn't help you. So do a 3-point, and then you can click 3 points, and that'll give you
the coordinate space, and then just go ahead and set that for UV space. And then you can take that, and now you can apply, different kinds of mapping to it. And then if you turn on the widget, and you select it, you should be able to rotate. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So I can rotate it around that point. So that's just a few things to think about when you're working with textures. It's not just enough to have the material. Sometimes you actually have to apply mapping in order to get it to look right. It takes a little bit of skill, and it takes kind of an artist's eye to be able to say, okay, if I'm looking at this, these planks, seem to be like 2x4s, or they're just out of proportion, and so that's where you need to adjust the map or scale it or like rotate it, because the system isn't very smart. Like it doesn't know what material you're applying and the way that it should look in real life. So like if you know something about texture mapping, you can really achieve the effect that you want. There's so many materials available for Maxwell. But again, they don't always work right if you just apply them. So it's something useful, especially like in architecture, when you have materials that have a certain proportion, like concrete blocks or stones or tiles. Anything that has linear elements that are like repetitive. That's another thing to mention. I think I didn't really say it, but these textures. Only one piece of this is the texture. The texture just keeps being repeated over and over again. And it just takes on the appearance that it's like this unlimited kind of material, but it's actually like repeating. And if you pay attention to a lot of renderings, you'll actually notice where that repetition is. And being able to obscure that is a really important skill. It requires you to have the right texture, but also to apply it in the model in a way that you really can't tell where it's being repeated. And it might take a little bit of photoshopping to fix. But we can talk about that later. So there's just basic ideas about texture mapping. So like if you apply something to your model that has repetition, you're going to really want to look at that like texture mapping. All right, so now I'm back to my model again, and it's still pretty boring. I've got just the basic kind of gray diffuse material and this simple kind of glass material that we applied to before. Let's go ahead and try to add something a little bit more interesting, like concrete or something. I'm gonna go. Make sure you use the materials I gave you, and put anything that you download in like its own directory. You don't want to use the default Maxwell materials. There's a problem with them right now, that between the 32-bit and the 64-bit version, like where I've applied materials before and they don't really show up in your model because it can't find the texture files. So let's make sure that it can find the files. Just put them on your desktop or in your like 230 directory. It's just something that isn't really that easy to work with. I gave you some sample stuff in this texture mapping directory that you can work with. I've also got some concrete materials here. Let's take a look at this concrete like material. And we can go ahead, and I'm actually just going to add it to one object for now. So I'm just going to click on this one, like this wall, let's say. And we can go into the material, and we can say assign by object, and then we can just assign concrete to it. Let's see if I can get it coming up. It doesn't show up in the rendered view. Let's take a look at it in Maxwell though. Yeah, so you can see it is different slightly, but it's not really doing much. And I think it's because we don't really have the mapping applied to it. So let's go ahead and go into texture mapping. Give it a box map, bounding box, world, capped. Now you can see it. See little pits in there? I gotta get my camera a little bit more delicate. Okay, so that side seems okay. You can see a seam in it. And this is not good. Look at that. They just stretched the thing. That's crazy. So we gotta do what? We gotta go in and adjust the UVW coordinates. Looks like it needs more tiling. There we go. So you can see, look at that. So if I know what I'm doing, I can say, okay, I kind of know where the seams in this are, and I can say more or less that's 8 feet. If you really want to measure it, you can just draw a polygon and measure it. Let's go ahead and adjust that in your model, and let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's go ahead and test drive that in Maxwell Render. Just overwrite this for now. Let's see what we got. And with textures added, these might take a little bit longer to render, because it's not it's working with that material a lot more closely. And you might not see the details for a couple of like sampling levels. Let's see what we got. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really seeing a big difference yet. I don't know if I've made a mistake. Definitely shows up here though. This is interesting. Oh, huh. Might need to adjust the mapping here, as it's not really this might need to be surface mapped or something, because it's not or I might need to stretch the size of it. You can affect the size of it, here as well, where you can actually change the size of the box that it starts with. You can experiment with it as opposed to actually stretching it. You gotta be kind of careful with it though. Still seems awfully tight. So anyway, you can just kind of experiment. I mean, this is basically tiling it like one time. If you have multiple tiles, you're gonna see the seams in it. You need to kind of experiment to get a feel for it. I think I really messed this up. Oh, there we go. So if I make that a lot bigger, that seems to work. In fact, yeah. Now again, though, like I've got a big, ugly kind of seam in it and stuff. I'd probably need to texture map that. Sometimes you don't want to have things that have visible seams in them. It's nice because I didn't have to model these like joints. I can let the texture do that, but then you've got to adjust the texture. So you have to kind of ask yourself, like, do you want to be editing textures or do you want to be editing models? And that's kind of your choice. Let's see what we see in fire. I don't know. I'm not picking up. I'm not really seeing the texture showing up here, which is kind of weird. Yeah, that's odd. Okay. Let's see what we got. Let's go to the materials again. Scene manager, concrete. I don't know, looks like something. Oh, it has bad paths. Oh. Let's see here. Invalid paths report for the material. Okay, so looks like our materials need a little bit of help. So we can take a look at that. Anything that's red is that it's not finding the right material. So it looks like we want this bump map here. Let's go to concrete. So that's the bump map. So we can fix that map. Okay. And then let's go back. So that's a red one. So I'm double clicking this, and that one wants to be just this concrete one. And we can fix these. Any of these red ones. That's a red one. And it wants to be concrete TM. and that wants to be the bump map. And the bump map is just it's a map that helps the computer understand like where the seams and the material are, and it gives it. Oh, we just changed it. Good. And it gives it. It's a grayscale map. It's black and white. And basically, things that are dark are like negative space, like they're kind of pulled in, and things that are light are positive space, and they kind of pop out, and it makes bumps, and that's why it's called a bump map. And a bump map basically just simulates texture in three-dimensional space, but it's really basically faked. There we go. All right, so we had some mapping issues, and that was a problem. But it's all fixed. Okay, so now we can go in and maybe I can add a little bit more to this. Everything has to be kind of experimental. Okay, so we've got a seam in that. Let's go ahead and throw that into render for now. Yeah, I can, even in the preview window, I can tell it's working. So with the materials that we have, I think they might have some bad paths. So if you fix the paths and you keep the files where they are, you shouldn't have to do it ever again. It's just something about maybe copying the files over that screwed up the paths. But you can see though that now we have concrete, and our concrete has seams in it. It has some nice additional detail. It's not just kind of a bland kind of texture. Yeah, that's going to work out really nice. Let's go ahead and cancel that out. Some other stuff that I've got for you guys that I think is kind of fun. I've got some paper model materials. So I got some model materials that make it look like your model's made out of the kinds of things you guys use in Studio. So I've got like a basswood material. And it looks like this basswood's got, bad paths. Shoot. All right, so we're going to open it up. Let's look at this. Looks like we've got basswoodcolor.tiff. This shouldn't be too hard, so just go to basswood color. And this is actually good because it kind of gives you a sense of how materials are made. So it's just a series of images that are layered on top of each other. So some of them just have color information. Some of them are kind of bump maps. Some of them have transparency maps. So this one says basswoodroughness.tiff. So that's a surface character. Roughness is another kind of quality that affects the way that light kind of shines on it. And then there's a bump map. So we're gonna use the bump map. And let's refresh this. Yeah, and I think we've got our basswood. Let's go back to our has bad paths. What else? No more invalid paths. They're fine. All right. So let's go ahead and drop that. Ooh, look at that. It's got like a nice wood. And our mapping is actually pretty good, like what we mapped. You can kind of see the repetition though, right? With these things here. Let's see what that looks like as a rendering. Render. And and you can kind of play with it. I've got some cardboard for you. I've got some other materials. Now, basswood, right, it's pretty shiny. It's going to take light a lot differently than concrete. So we might have to adjust our exposure. You can see how bright and kind of yellow that gets. But you can also see the effects of those different maps, as the rendering kind of finishes. There's probably going to be, like I said, there's going to be a lot of shine to it. You're going to have, a little bit of that wood grain. Kind of light wood grain. Let's see what we get. You also notice that the light bouncing off of this paints the ground like slightly yellow. And that's a property of light. When light strikes a colored surface, it kind of creates a reflection of that light that's colored onto another surface. So if you put like a red rug in a white room, it makes the room slightly pink if you actually look at it. And that's okay. That's actually an effect that happens. So it'll take quite a few samples, I think, to actually start to really resolve the like wood grain. I think it's a very fine wood grain. Something I didn't know if I mentioned, but in terms of sample levels, it takes about 12, 13, 14 sample levels to really get a clear image. Of course, you could always stop the rendering process at some point And that would probably be good enough, at least for feedback. It might be good for a final review in a pinch. But there's a maximum sampling level of about 25. It's about the most you can ever sample an image. And a lot of times you won't ever even get there because it'll take too long or you just don't need it. But Maxwell's great because you can either say like, okay, I want a certain amount of time. I only have a certain amount of time, or I want a certain number of like sampling levels, and it can give you both. This isn't too bad. I don't really see a lot of repetition in the texture. I don't see the seams. That must have just been. I can kind of see a seam right there, but that's not bad. I mean, I have kind of a trained eye for this, but it doesn't seem that bad. But you can see the wood grain. Yeah, it looks like basswood, so not too bad. Okay, so take some time with these, with these materials that we've given you. You may have to fix the paths. I might go back and try to fix that myself before I give it back to you. But I've got different things like I've got chipboard. Actually, looked around for these for quite a while. So I've got things that look like styrene, foam, corrugated cardboard. There's the inside of a piece of cardboard and the outside of a piece of cardboard. And this one's got bad paths too. So yeah, we're probably gonna have to fix these. Anyway, experiment with those with your model. Remember texture mapping. Texture mapping is really important. Go ahead and try to render this model using different sorts of materials for different things. So like, what are the walls? It's going to go ahead and lock that. What are the walls made out of? Right? What are the railings made out of? Some kind of metal? Right? What if these were perforated metal instead of glass, right? And maybe the kind of glass doors are made out of glass. What if these panels are some material like some kind of wood or some kind of light concrete or metal or brick? Maybe it's brick. So I want you to do 3 different versions of this project using different kinds of material palettes. What about some gravel on the roof? Okay, and you might need to take the model apart in different places. You might need to explode it so you can like texture map it. But think about what kinds of colors you want it to be. Think about kinds of materials, what kinds of textures you have. Think about how it would really be made and how you want to represent it hierarchically, right? The facades have a hierarchy. They are a hierarchical spatial composition, just like we talked about in the first studio project. So don't just like mess around with materials. Like really think about the way you want to apply the materials to it to explain the building, to help the building read, to give it a certain feeling. Remember to use cameras. I want you guys to take 3 different camera views of the building with use the same camera, but do the 3 different material sets using the 3 different cameras. So you'll have 9 images total, and that should give you a really good understanding of how lighting and texturing and like the camera works to make a compelling image. And we'll take a look at those next week. All right, I'll talk to you soon.